Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael woke up early as always, had his coffee, checked the equipment in the truck, and left for another scheduled job. The request was simple: an electrical review at a newly renovated house on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of work he had been doing for years, with attention, professionalism, and without rushing. When he arrived, the homeowner showed him the breaker box and went upstairs to answer a call. Michael was left alone on the ground floor, inspecting the wires and replacing an outlet that seemed poorly installed. He did everything with focus, as always. His mind was calm, his heart at peace, life moving along the path he believed was solid. He was almost done when he realized he needed to grab a tool from the car. He went out the front door and headed toward the sidewalk. As he looked up, something made him stop mid-motion. Rachel, his wife. She was crossing the street alone, with a calm expression, as if she knew exactly where she was going. She walked straight to the house next to the one he was working on. Michael stood still, watching from a distance, trying to understand if what he was seeing was real. Before Rachel could ring the doorbell, the door opened. The man who appeared, Simon, smiled as if he had been expecting her. They kissed, as if it were part of their routine. Then she went inside without hesitation. Michael remained frozen, feeling his blood rush faster. That scene took his breath away. There was no doubt. It was certainty. It was more than a slip-up. It was familiarity. It was habit. He swallowed hard, clenched his teeth, and walked over to the house. When he got to the door, he knocked forcefully. 3 times. Straight. Clear and firm. The man appeared looking confused, clearly unsure who the visitor was. Michael stared at him and spoke with a voice full of tension. "Call my wife here. Now. Or I'm coming after you." Simon's face froze. Rachel appeared right behind him, eyes wide and face pale as paper. She put her hand to her chest, surprised. She tried to speak, but the words tangled. "Michael, I..." She was interrupted mid-attempt. He didn't want speeches. She tried to approach, but he raised a hand and said, "Stay there. You're not stepping foot in my house again. It's over. You chose. Now deal with it." He turned his back and walked away. He left the silence behind, along with the image of her standing at the door, completely stunned. He didn't stop to hear excuses or ask for reasons. Because at that moment, everything was painfully clear. No explanation would change what he saw. No apology would hold value after that kiss so natural and casual. When he got home, he went straight to the bedroom. He gathered all her clothes, shoes, perfumes, photographs, personal items. He carefully packed everything into the car. This wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a decision. He returned to the lover's house. He stopped in front, opened the trunk, and started leaving everything on the curb. Without saying a word. He just placed the items there, one by one, while some neighbors watched from a distance, whispering quietly. Michael acted calmly, without making a scene. He did what needed to be done. It was the end of a cycle, painful, but necessary. As he dumped the last box on top of the others, an older woman sweeping the sidewalk nearby stopped to watch for a few seconds, then shook her head, as if she'd seen this story before. Michael got into the car and drove away. For the first time, he felt that the house he lived in already felt lighter. In the days that followed, Michael woke up before the alarm, as he always did, but now the silence of the house had a different sound. The dishes in the drying rack, the toothbrush alone in the cup, the empty space on the right side of the bed, everything seemed to remind him that something had changed. He kept his routine, not out of obligation, but for survival. He got up, had coffee, grabbed his tools, and left for work. Neighbors watched with a certain respect as he passed by. Some avoided contact, others greeted him with a discreet nod, as if they recognized the pain he carried on his face. But he wasn't seeking comfort. He was too busy trying to regain balance within himself. Rachel, on the other hand, spent the first few days quiet in Simon's house. She felt the weight of the choice she had made, but still tried to believe she had made the right decision. She slept poorly, her head filled with images of what she had witnessed that afternoon, Michael standing at the door, the bags on the ground, the look on his face when he said she wouldn't return. That image clung to her like a bitter reminder. Simon tried to lighten the mood in the first few days, bringing her coffee in bed, making improvised dinners, trying to distract her. But she no longer smiled with the same lightness. And he noticed. Michael, at home, spent an afternoon clearing out cabinets. He stored away picture frames, removed the quilt she had chosen, rearranged the living room. He did it all in silence, as if dismantling a story with his own hands. He threw away old letters, tore up a birthday note he had kept for years, and even changed his phone ringtone. Everything that smelled of memory had to go. One Saturday, he took the papers to the lawyer. He simply said, "Go ahead and file. I don't want any disputes. I just want to finish this." And he left the office as if he had lifted a huge weight off his shoulders. Rachel tried to reach out. She sent messages, called from her mother's phone, emailed asking to talk before any decisions were made. She wrote that she still loved him, that she was confused, that she wanted to fix things. Michael read it all in silence. He deleted the messages, took a deep breath, and decided that responding would only prolong what had already ended. Her betrayal had caused a fracture that couldn't be repaired. He didn't need to hear excuses for something he had witnessed with his own eyes. Simon began to notice that Rachel avoided eye contact. She stayed in the bedroom most of the time, didn't talk about the future, complained about everything. Gradually, what had started as passion became discomfort. Rachel felt displaced in the house where she thought she'd be happy. Michael, on the other hand, was finding balance again. One day after work, he stopped at a bar, ordered a beer, and sat there quietly, observing the crowd. For the first time, he felt that breathing hurt less. 15 days later, the official delivered the papers to Rachel. When she read what was written, she felt a tightness in her chest. It was real. Michael wanted a divorce. And he was really going through with it. She signed, but cried for hours afterward. She had expected him to give in, to soften, to leave a door slightly open. But he had closed them all. On the morning of the final signing, both arrived at the notary's office at the scheduled time. Rachel avoided looking into his eyes. Michael simply greeted the clerk and picked up the pen. He signed firmly, without hesitation. Rachel signed right after, her hand trembling. When they finished, they glanced at each other for a brief moment. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be said. They left through separate doors, heading in opposite directions, carrying the exact weight of the choices they had made. And the freedom that only an ending can offer. A few weeks earlier. The story between Rachel and Simon began like many others that start in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with intentions no one dares admit up front. It all started at the gym. Rachel had begun going on a friend's recommendation. She said she wanted to take better care of herself, carve out some time to relax and feel better. Partly true. Her marriage no longer satisfied her as it once did, and she sought distractions. Michael never suspected a thing. While she attended spinning and weightlifting classes, he worked all day on installations and maintenance, believing they were building a solid life together, while she slowly built another reality, far from his sight. Simon was a weightlifting instructor. Young, outgoing, full of ready-made phrases and that easy smile many confuse for charm. He knew how to approach. He knew the right time to compliment, the perfect moment for a joke, the right measure to seem interested but casual. At first, Rachel found it amusing, that's all. She told her friends, said it was just his vanity. Over time, she started noticing more. One day she commented to a coworker, "If I were single, I might even flirt with him." Then she laughed, as if it were just a joke. But deep down, it wasn't entirely a joke anymore. Simon started pulling her into more conversations. He asked about her day, talked about his own problems, positioned himself as someone who understood her frustrations. When she mentioned she was married, he smiled and said respect was important. But he didn't distance himself. On the contrary. He began observing her workouts more closely, correcting postures with lingering touches, commenting that she seemed different, prettier, more alive. And Rachel, who hadn't heard compliments in a long time, started waiting for them like someone craving a mild addiction. That routine of glances and scattered phrases became a ritual. Michael continued at home, preparing simple dinners for when she returned from the gym. She ate quickly, gave him a hurried kiss, and went to shower. She said she was tired, that the day had been tough. He believed her. Their first meeting outside the gym happened after days of this silent game. Rachel made up an excuse and met Simon at a nearby cafe. They talked for nearly 2 hours. She told him everything. About the pressures at home, the lack of attention, the small arguments that piled up. Simon listened as if he'd never judge her. The real mistake happened days later, when he invited her to see his new place. She hesitated, but went. And from that point on, everything that had been imagination became reality. They began seeing each other frequently. Simon, aware that she was married, didn't mind. On the contrary. He found it exciting. He said Michael was stupid for not seeing what he had at home. Rachel laughed, feeling desired. She felt alive again. But deep down, something unsettled her. She knew she was crossing a line she might not be able to return from. With every meeting, guilt arose, but it was drowned out by the adrenaline of the moment. Eventually, she stopped caring. Rachel began emotionally distancing herself from Michael in a cold way. She stopped asking about his day, avoided any one-on-one moments. She said she needed space, that she was focusing on herself. Michael, unaware of what was happening, respected it. He tried to please her, made surprises, offered help with chores. But nothing worked. She was already somewhere else. Her body still slept in the same bed, but her heart had a different address. And that's why she didn't hesitate to enter Simon's house that afternoon. Betrayal had become routine. The cruelest part is that, at certain moments, Rachel even believed she was trading stability for love. That she was freeing herself from emotional prison to live something new. But what she didn't see, or pretended not to see, was that this new relationship carried the same weaknesses she swore to avoid. Simon enjoyed the game, the chase, the thrill of transgression. But no one can sustain that for long. Desire born in the shadows doesn't survive when exposed to daylight. At that time, Rachel felt powerful. She imagined she had control over everything. She was living 2 lives and deciding when to enter and exit each one. She thought that if things ever fell apart with Michael, she'd have Simon to fall back on. What she didn't consider was the character of someone willing to enter a relationship where another person must be deceived. And what begins by hurting someone eventually turns against the one who caused the harm. But that, she would only understand later. For now, she was convinced she had won. That she had come out on top. That she had chosen. And that she would be happy, no matter the cost. At first, life with Simon seemed like a victory. She believed she had made a smart trade. She began posting subtle photos on social media, smiling alongside him at restaurants, cafes, and hiking trails. Close friends pretended to support her, but behind the scenes, they whispered. Michael didn't comment. He never said anything to anyone, didn't care to know what was happening with her. His lack of reaction was, in fact, what bothered her the most. She expected fury, scandal, pleas to come back. His silence was the first crack in the castle she thought she had built so firmly. Life with Simon seemed light, but it only took a few weeks for everything to change. What had been desire turned into cohabitation. And with it came small frustrations. Simon was no longer the charming man from the gym. He no longer cared to listen, lost patience quickly, complained about work, got irritated with demands. Rachel began to feel like she was in a familiar place, dissatisfaction, routine, disconnection. Only this time, without the foundation of respect she once had. Instead of trying to communicate, she repeated the same mistakes. She distanced herself. She stayed silent. She spent more time at the hospital where she worked part-time than at home. She started telling herself it was just a phase, that she needed to wait it out. But inside, something began to collapse with force. 3 months after the separation, Rachel met a new physical therapist who had just started working at the same facility. Young, attentive, friendly. They began chatting during breaks, exchanging messages, having lunch together. It was exactly the same pattern as when she met Simon. Only this time, she didn't reflect on her choices. She gave in without resistance. She created excuses to leave the house, started lying to Simon, invented extra shifts, fabricated meetings. She began living 2 worlds again, as if she hadn't learned a thing. The thrill of feeling desired was stronger than any memory of pain caused to others. The previous betrayal, which destroyed a marriage, hadn't served as a lesson. It served as a model. The following Friday, Simon decided to leave work early. He was suspicious, irritated by her behavior. He arrived home and saw her car in the driveway. He entered silently. He stopped at the living room door and froze. Rachel was lying on the couch with the physical therapist. They were laughing as if they were at a hotel, as if nothing else mattered. Simon didn't shout. He didn't make a scene either. He walked up to them, pointed to the door, and said with a frightening calm, "You two have 2 minutes." Rachel tried to argue, but he had already turned his back. He went into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, packed her clothes, and threw them onto the curb. The guy left without saying a word. Rachel stood there, motionless in the middle of the living room, as if finally understanding what she had done. Simon slammed the door with controlled force and leaned against the hallway wall, feeling his heart race. For a moment, he tried to organize his thoughts, to process what he had just seen. Rachel, on the couch, with another man. On the same couch where they watched movies, where she said she felt at peace. All of that crumbled before him like a silent avalanche. He brought his hand to his face, muffling a sigh that came uninvited. And there, alone in the hallway, it hit him with brutal clarity. A sentence cut through his mind like a blade, "Now I'm in his place. That's exactly what I did to her husband." He stood still for a while, staring into the void. The pain wasn't just from the betrayal. It was the mirror. It was the reflection of his own mistake coming back with force. He felt shame. Anger at himself. Because for the first time, he understood, firsthand, what it meant to be destroyed by someone he trusted. Everything Michael had felt, he was now experiencing. Without anesthesia. Without excuses. And the bitterest part of it all was that he knew he deserved it. In the days that followed, she tried to justify herself. She sent messages, said she was confused, that their relationship had changed, that she was lonely. Simon read each message with a sick feeling in his stomach. It was like seeing a mirror throw back every word he had used months ago to justify what he did to Michael. In that silent downfall, Simon understood what it means to get involved with someone who betrays without resolving what they carry inside. And he also understood that he deserved to go through that. For the first time, he acknowledged his own responsibility. But the regret came too late. Meanwhile, Michael moved on with his life in peace. He no longer carried the weight in his chest. He worked as always, maintained his routine, took care of himself. A mutual friend told him about Rachel's latest betrayal. He expected to see Michael outraged. Michael just smiled. He didn't say a word. The feeling he had was that the universe had placed every piece in its rightful place. It didn't cause him pain, nor joy. It was just confirmation of something he had always known: character doesn't change with the scenery, it changes when someone chooses to be different. And Rachel kept searching in others what she had never managed to develop within herself. One night, Michael was at a bar with an old childhood friend, Thomas. He told the whole story. Thomas listened without interrupting. At the end, he ordered 2 more beers, raised his glass, and said with a laugh, "I learned something from all this: never trust a gym full of personal trainers with billboard smiles." Michael gave a slight laugh, raised his glass too, and replied, "And never settle for less than you deserve." They toasted. Rachel, now temporarily living with a cousin, cried often. The series of losses had left visible marks. She tried to return to the hospital with her head held high, but the gossip had already spread. The physical therapist was transferred to another department. Simon didn't reach out anymore. Michael didn't respond to any emails. And she, surrounded by her own echo, began to understand what she had caused. No one needed to yell at her, no one needed to slam doors or raise their voices. It was the absence of response that showed her the weight of each choice. Because some losses are only truly felt when everyone is already gone. And Michael, on the other side of this story, closed a chapter. Without drama, without noise, without looking back. He carried the dignity of someone who was betrayed but didn't let himself become like those who wronged him. His true victory was moving forward without becoming bitter, without harboring resentment, without seeking revenge. His peace came from the strength to know when to walk away. And when someone has the courage to leave with their head held high from a situation like that, the fresh start begins clean. Life may take its time, but sooner or later, it always responds. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.